Hey everybody, we are breaking into Proverbs 3, verse 7 and 8 today. And if you've been watching for any length of time, you'll know that from the video where we addressed Proverbs 3, 5, if you haven't seen that, the link's in the description. I encourage you to check it out. But you'll know that verses 5 through 12 are 8 verses. That is one unit. But it's broken up into 4 parts, and the verses are 2 by 2. And it addresses 4 different principles that stand alone, but they also all 4 are one, like a unit. They all touch each other, but they're all distinct and unique. And so today we're looking at Proverbs chapter 3, verse 7 and 8. And we're going to be talking about a couple of different principles. We're going to talk about do not be wise in your own eyes and what that really means and the underlying values and principles behind that statement. And then we're going to be looking at one of my favorite topics, the fear of the Lord. And it's my hope to teach on the fear of the Lord at length on this channel, but today I'm so excited we're going to just kind of scratch the surface of the fear of the Lord, and I'm excited to get into that. But without further ado, if you're ready, let's go ahead and dive into Proverbs 3, and we're going to look at our text for today and just begin diving in. One thing you're going to note is I am going to use a lot of verses today, and a lot of them come from other chapters in Proverbs. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I want you to see how the author of the book of Proverbs writes. It's a very interesting composition style or rhetoric. I would say maybe composition techniques is probably the best word to use, because what he does is he sort of leaves a crumb trail where he'll subtly mention a tiny aspect of a larger concept throughout all 30 chapters to create, by the end of it, when you add them all together, all of his statements throughout all 30 chapters, let's say fear of the Lord. We'll look at an example today where he'll, in this chapter and these verses, he'll leave a subtle crumb on the fear of the Lord. And by itself doesn't give you a full picture, but it gives you a good insight to an aspect of the fear of the Lord. You have to take the fuller picture that's painted over the course of 30 chapters to really understand the fear of the Lord. And he does that from fear of the Lord, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, several things like that. And so what I'm going to attempt to do is through using several different Proverbs today, you'll begin to see a bigger picture, hopefully. So without further ado, let's go ahead and read our text for today. Proverbs 3, 7, and 8 say, "Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. This will be healing for your body and strengthening for your bones." Now, I want to spend the majority of our time in verse 7 today. We will look at verse 8 towards the end, but really a lot of the meat and potatoes for today is found in verse 7. So let's begin breaking verse 7 down. First, do not be wise in your own eyes. What is behind this statement? Do not be wise in your own eyes. On the surface, most of us are probably saying, I'm definitely not wise in my own eyes. I don't consider myself wise. I'm humble. I'm not conceited in that way. But what you and I don't realize is how many times throughout the day we make choices from our own understanding and our own wisdom. And when we do that, we actually begin to tread the line of being wise in our own eyes. We begin to rely on our own understanding. And anytime we rely on our own understanding, as we talked about in the video where we addressed chapter 3, verse 5, we begin to display what it looks like to be wise in your own eyes. Okay, and we're going to break this down a little bit more. But I want you to know that it is impossible to fear the Lord while being wise in your own eyes, because the fear of the Lord requires humility, as we're going to see. And it is impossible to be humble yet wise in your own eyes at the same time, because to be wise in your own eyes at its core is to be conceited. Okay, so let's look at a couple verses here. Proverbs 26, verse 12. Do you see a person who is wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than him. Okay, and this is this is actually an extreme statement considering all the things that Solomon will speak against the fool throughout the 30 chapters of Proverbs. And he's saying there's more hope for that guy, the fool, than for one who's wise in his own eyes, conceited, arrogant, and relies in his own understanding, okay? Proverbs 28:26. The one who trusts in himself is a fool, but one who walks in wisdom will be safe. Now, in Proverbs 3:5, we talked about trusting in, and we go really deep into this phrase in Proverbs 3:5. And in Proverbs 3:6, we go a lot deeper into walking in ways that acknowledge the Lord. Okay. Now, this is where I want to make the connection between relying on your own understanding, Proverbs 3:5, and trusting in oneself, okay? And then being wise in your own eyes. They're all linked. I don't want to go as far to say synonymous because I think they have nuances, but they're all linked together in some way. To trust in yourself, to rely on your own understanding, and to be wise in your own eyes. These things are all connected. So everything that applies to one who is trusting in their own understanding in the video I did on chapter 3, verse 5 applies to one who's wise in their own eyes. So that's why I want to make that connection. And I want you to go watch that video if you haven't, because they're connected. So the one who trusts in himself is a fool, but the one who walks in wisdom will be safe. And we're going to see where the source of wisdom is in just a minute. This is why the author of Proverbs is such a genius, because he connects not being wise in your own eyes to the fear of the Lord. All right. And we're going to see that wisdom and the fear of the Lord are connected. But before we get there, one little quote by Paul in Romans 12:16. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud. That's important. Do not be proud. Instead, associate with the humble. Okay, so pride and humility, he's making an emphasis here. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Okay, in other words, he's saying pride, do not be proud, and do not be wise in your own estimation. Okay, because to be wise in your own estimation is to be proud. Instead, associate with the humble. Okay, now that's going to prove to be an important text. Okay, in just a minute. But before we go any further here, I want to show you that humility and the fear of the Lord are connected, not just humility or conceit and wisdom in your own eyes, okay? So we know it's obvious that to be wise in your own eyes is to be proud. But why does the author connect humility, which is to not be wise in your own eyes, with the fear of the Lord? Okay, we just kind of got a hint here in Proverbs 22:4. Humility, comma, the fear of the Lord results in wealth, honor, and life. Now, I want to point out something you're not going to see in the English and something we're not going to see by just looking at the way this is written here. The Hebrew word, the Hebrew root, so the way that Hebrew language works is you have roots, and then you have stems. So it adds letters to the front side or back side or both of a root, and it will create new meaning, or it will create a perfect or imperfect usage of the word, depending on the syntax of the entire sentence. And it, depending on the stem, it'll give us information to how that root is being applied or carried out in the sentence. And I know that's pretty geeky and pretty advanced, but here's what I want you to know. The same root for fear is the same root for piety or humility with different stems in the Hebrew. So humility and the fear of the Lord have the same root. They're distinct, they're unique, but they have the same root. They're intrinsically connected. All right. And so when we see here, humility, comma, the fear of the Lord, humility, it's not saying humility and the fear of the Lord as though humility is something separate from the fear of the Lord. It's saying humility, aka the fear of the Lord. All right. It's connecting them. And now that's what's important to hold on to as we move forward. But also note this, because it links into verse 8. Humility, the fear of the Lord, results in wealth, honor, and life. Remember that word life, because that specifically connects to verse 8, okay? Now let's go continue reading. All right, the fear of the Lord. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Now, why is wisdom connected to the fear of the Lord? It's amazing what the author does here, because without saying it, he connects both humility and wisdom to the fear of the Lord. Humility, because he's saying don't be wise in your own eyes. In other words, be humble. And wisdom, because the object of that first line is wisdom. It's wise in your own eyes. So he's alluding to both humility and wisdom and connecting them to the fear of the Lord. We've already seen how humility is connected to the fear of the Lord, but look now how wisdom is connected to the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. So the author here is really a genius. He's saying a lot by saying a little, and you really have to kind of dig, and you really have to look at the rest of the Proverbs to really come to the conclusion of, oh man, this is genius authorship. To really appreciate what he's doing here is you have to look at all of the Proverbs, and that's why I'm pulling from so many right now. Okay. But one thing about the fear of the Lord, first, it's the fear of the Lord is the beginning of true wisdom. Okay. And it's interesting, to enter into true wisdom, you have to be humble enough to see that you're not wise, it's just a fascinating paradox. But when you have begun to enter into the fear of the Lord and walk in it, one of the first things you're going to notice, first characteristics, is you turn away from evil. Your life, your character, your conduct, your desires, turn away from evil. Now, I want to address this briefly and dig into it much deeper in videos of the future. A lot of times we're taught that the fear of the Lord is reverence and awe for God. And this would be true. Reverence and awe is an attitude and a heart posture that we have towards God when we fear the Lord. However, to leave fear at reverence and awe is to leave the understanding of what fear of the Lord is incomplete. Matter of fact, I'd go so far as to liken that to focusing only on the tip of an iceberg. And we know that the danger of only focusing on the tip of an iceberg is the vast majority of the iceberg is concealed beneath the surface, and if not considered, can have catastrophic consequences. And what I want to note is that the fear of the Lord is not merely an attitude or heart posture towards God, though it includes that, because you cannot teach a heart posture or attitude. You can't teach that. And we have numerous texts that speak of teaching the fear of the Lord. And I'm not going to break into all of those texts today and show you, but I want your mind to begin turning that, hey, the fear of the Lord doesn't just feel like something the way we feel towards God. It looks like something. And that's what the author's getting at here when he says, turn away from evil. This is very practical and applicable and tangible for the fear of the Lord. It looks like something. It will have evidence, okay? It will have many evidences, but the first one, and the one we're focusing on, is it will be evidenced by the turning away from evil. Look at Proverbs 8:13. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. It's synonymous, all right? So here's another text that proves that reverence and awe is not all we should be talking about when we're teaching the fear of the Lord. Yes, it's included, but we've already seen that humility is also included. Now we're seeing that the hatred of evil is included. the turning away from evil, period, evil thoughts, evil words, evil tones of voice, evil attitudes, evil actions. All of that is included in the fear of the Lord. All right. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate arrogant pride, evil conduct, and perverse speech. Okay. This is important. Now watch what happens in Job 28:28. And this is where Solomon begins to refer back to older writings. What's fascinating about the Proverbs is we see Solomon writing all the things he's learned through life experiences, yes, but through Torah and through older writings of wisdom, such as the story of Job, right? Job 28:28 says, he said to mankind, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to turn from evil is understanding. Okay? To fear the Lord, the fear of the Lord is wisdom, and to turn from evil is understanding. Okay? So again, we have the fear of the Lord connected with wisdom, but we also have, remember in the video, chapter 3, verse 5, I keep referring back to it because, again, these 8 verses are intrinsically linked. So much of this touches, but remember in that video where we talked about the depths of understanding, that really came up a lot. And not to lean on your own understanding, but there's a godly understanding and a human understanding. There's a godly wisdom and a human wisdom, right? And it says to turn from evil is true understanding. It's not human understanding, not human wisdom, right? It's godly understanding. And godly wisdom is to fear the Lord. Now, let me ask you this to illustrate further. Do you think Abraham understood with his intellect why God was asking him to sacrifice Isaac? Do you think Gideon understood with his wisdom and intellect why God continued to dwindle down his army before going to war against a vast army? Well, in Gideon's mind, human wisdom, as we mentioned in previous videos, says that there is a greater chance for success with more bodies when you're going to war. Human wisdom does not say dwindle down your army to a couple hundred. Okay? For Abraham, similarly, when you and your wife are well beyond childbearing years, and it was a miracle that you had one child already, and God promises that through that one child, descendants more numerous than the stars would come, it doesn't make sense in our human understanding nor our human wisdom to kill that child. So Abraham in Genesis 22 is a beautiful picture of what it looks like, and so is Gideon, of not to lean on your own understanding. Meaning, don't lean on human understanding, don't lean on wisdom understanding, lean on godly wisdom and lean on godly understanding, right? Watch what happens in Genesis 22, verse 12. Then he said, this is the angel of the Lord, this is God himself speaking to Abraham. Just before Abraham is going to sacrifice Isaac, he stops him and he says this, do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me. You fear God. What does this mean? Does this mean Abraham only had reverence and awe towards God? Well, it certainly includes that. Does it mean Abraham had humility? Certainly includes that. But it also means that to fear God is to fully rely on God and consider him one who fulfills his promises and fulfills his word. Abraham was able to lay down his human wisdom and understanding because he trusted that God would fulfill his covenant promise to Abraham, even if he had to raise Isaac from the dead. Let's look at Hebrews 11:19. He considered God to be able even to raise someone from the dead. Therefore, he received him back, figuratively speaking. This is in reference to Isaac, okay? And so we can see that Abraham feared God through exercising his faith in God, which caused him to lay down his human understanding and his human wisdom and actually conduct an action that was contrary to that. That is incredibly difficult, incredibly hard to do. Yet Abraham saw the value in it. Okay, let's jump back and see what else, right? All right, it leads us to not only, right, turn away from evil, but it leads us also to turn to righteousness. Okay, so it's not that you just don't do evil, right? It's actually that you turn to and start desiring to make integrous decisions, right? Let's look at Proverbs 14:2. Whoever lives with integrity fears the Lord, but the one who is devious in his ways despises him. Now, this is interesting about this text, okay? We have fear and despising juxtaposed, like, or contrasted. Fear is the opposite of despising, is what this is saying. So what is an antonym to despising that you can think of? Because that would be applicable here for the fear of the Lord. So one who lives with integrity proves, they evidence with their life that they fear God. But one who lives wickedly and deviously proves that they actually despise God. Okay? And so we can see that fear is the antonym of despising God, which is a powerful picture. Okay, Proverbs 16:6. Iniquity is atoned for by loyalty and faithfulness, and one turns from evil by the fear of the Lord. Okay, so we saw in the last text how one not only turns from evil, but one turns to righteousness when they fear the Lord. Now we're seeing that loyalty and faithfulness are attributes of one who fears the Lord when they turn from evil. But what's so incredibly powerful, again, I'm going to refer to a previous video we've done, Proverbs 3, verse 3. When we talked in the video about Proverbs 3, verses 1 through 4, look at this. Never let loyalty and faithfulness leave you. Tie them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will find favor and high regard with God and people. I did 2 other videos that break this down. Okay, I'll leave those in the description below, but there's also a playlist, a whole playlist on Proverbs. So be sure to see that playlist and you can watch all of these because it's important to see how they all touch. It's amazing. Okay, Nehemiah 5:15. The governors who preceded me had heavily burdened the people, taking from them food and wine as well as a pound of silver. Their subordinates also oppressed the people. Watch this. This is a powerful picture. But because of the fear of God, I did not do this. So we have a picture here of Nehemiah actually fearing the Lord, right? Because oppressing and burdening the people in the ways described is evil. And Nehemiah says, because I feared the Lord, I didn't do these things. I turned from evil and I evidenced my fear of the Lord with my life. Okay. Now let's hop back here. I think we've painted a really great picture for verse 7, all right, in the time we've had. And I mentioned that verse 8 is going to be short and concise because the meat and potatoes was really in verse 7. So up to this point, I hope that you've seen a great concise summary of the truths within verse 7 and how they connect to verses 1 through 6, really, that we've read, but also a myriad of other Proverbs. We've looked at, goodness, it feels like at least 6 or 7 other Proverbs, but we're not done yet because now we're getting into verse 8. And we're going to look at 2 other Proverbs that connect just to verse 8. So let's read it here. This, right, humility, not being wise in your own eyes, instead pursuing godly wisdom and godly understanding, and the fear of the Lord, and turning away from evil, okay, they're all kind of connected there. These things will be healing for your body. That's pretty amazing. And strength for your bones. So the fear of the Lord actually has some amazing byproducts, okay? Proverbs 10:27. The fear of the Lord prolongs life, but the years of the wicked are cut short. Proverbs 14:27, we see it again. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, turning people away from the snares of death. Well, what are the snares of death? They are along the path of those who walk in wickedness. So to turn from evil is to do a 180 on that path that leads to the snares of death. And it takes us towards the fountain of life. And that path that takes us towards the fountain of life is the fear of the Lord. Okay, and so this has been an amazing breakdown of Proverbs 3, 7, and 8. And just to conclude, I'll say this. To fail to trust in the Lord is to be conceited, because in doing so, you're trusting in something else. And you may say, well, I'm not trusting in myself. I'm trusting in the advice that I got from this, expert. Well, you're trusting in yourself to trust in that expert, meaning you are trusting that it's a good idea to trust the expert over God, and you gave yourself that advice. So at the root of every decision, you're trusting yourself because you made the decision. That every decision you make, you made the decision. And you can be led back down to the root of trusting yourself. So to not trust the Lord, Adonai, in everything we do and rely on him is to trust in ourselves, which is to be conceited. You cannot be conceited and fear the Lord, because the fear of the Lord and humility are linked. They're rooted in the same thing, from the same place. But if we fear the Lord, all right, we will trust him. And as a result, this will be evidenced by the turning away from evil and the turning unto righteousness. Now, what's amazing is we're not just going to turn from evil and turn to righteousness because it's the religious thing to do. We'll actually have new desires, because he'll come in Jeremiah 31, write his law on our heart, and his spirit will begin to change our desires. We'll begin to desire good things, the things that are in line with the fear of the Lord, integrity, righteousness, and we'll begin to be repulsed by evil and those things, okay? And so by doing this, by walking in the fear of the Lord, we'll bring, what is Proverbs 3:8? We'll bring healing for our body and strength to our bones. We'll bring life to our body, health to our flesh. We'll begin to walk the path that leads us to the fountain of life. And so I hope that this has been a helpful, though concise, breakdown of Proverbs 3, verse 7 and 8. Until next time, as always, God bless you guys.